What if the biggest mistake preventing your early retirement isn't your account balance, but how you're thinking about your 401k? Through working with hundreds of clients who have the money but worry about the execution, I've discovered one fundamental shift in 401k strategy that eliminates this mistake and creates income certainty traditional approaches miss entirely. And that's why I'm making this video to show you the change that removes timing anxiety and gives you clear permission to retire when you've actually saved enough. The problem starts with how we're conditioned to think about retirement savings. We're taught one skill for 30 years, accumulation, but never taught the completely different skill required in retirement, which is strategic distribution. Think about it. What farmer plants crops without thinking through when and how much they'll harvest? Yet, that's exactly what most retirement savers do. They keep planting row after row without a harvest plan. And most retirees can tell me down to the dollar their 401k balance, but when I ask about their withdrawal strategy, they gravitate to rules of thumb such as the 4% rule or I'll just take what I need. We're taught to save obsessively for 30 plus years, but when it comes to actually using that money efficiently, most are left guessing with oversimplified formulas that don't account for tax efficiency, healthcare costs, or your specific situation. But here's the part that haunts my clients the most. It's not just about the money, but about the years you're trading for dollars you may never spend. Money comes and goes, but years are non-renewable. You can't harvest time that you've already lost. In fact, let me show you what this looks like. I recently met with a client, I'll call him David, who's 59 years old, who told me he wants to work until he's 69 years old, largely because he wants to get his kids through college and wait for his wife to reach Medicare age at 65. And both are completely understandable concerns. But when running the numbers, those obstacles total around $235,000. His nest egg, on the other hand, is over $6 million. He's trading his entire 60s for hurdles representing less than 4% of his wealth, obstacles that a plan reveals his portfolio could absorb without breaking a sweat. When I find people have this type of clarity instead of foggy uncertainty, everything shifts for them. With this clarity, they get confidence. And like a farmer who keeps sowing seeds out of momentum, he hadn't stopped to measure what he needed versus what he'd already grown. And this accumulation myth creates three specific problems. First, an oversized 401k balance creates the RMD tax time bomb, those forced distributions that push clients often into 32% or higher tax brackets when you could have been converting at lower, say 22% during early retirement for an instant 10% savings on your largest asset. Second, working those extra years means missing the low income window between retirement and Social Security, which is really the only time you have complete control over your taxable income for strategic planning. And third, you're trading those prime health years for dollars that create tax problems down the road. And this planting row after row makes you have to ask at some point, how much harvest does my family actually need? Because excess 401k savings get taxed away out of forced distribution. So that's the core accumulation trap, working longer than necessary because you're measuring your 401k balance instead of your actual needs. But even if you recognize you saved enough, there's an even more dangerous problem that most people don't realize until it's too late. Figuring out how to turn your portfolio into a paycheck is much more complex than just accumulating it. And unlike accumulation, where you had 30 years to practice, you don't get a practice run at retirement. I like to use this mountain climbing analogy with clients, where during accumulation phase, if you make a mistake, it's like climbing up a mountain. Worst case scenario, you're falling forward, but you keep climbing. But decumulation, the journey down, has different consequences. One misstep and you're potentially sliding out of control, sometimes off a cliff that you can't recover from. And that's why I feel successful retirement planning isn't about hitting home runs, it's about avoiding those costly strikeouts. And there are four specific blind spots I see repeatedly, mistakes that each can carry six-figure consequences. The first blind spot is tax sequencing, which is essentially asking which accounts do you withdraw from and in which order? And how much do you do from each? And frankly, most people just guess, and the wrong sequence compounds into massive unnecessary taxes. For example, say you want to spend $180,000 per year. You pull that all from your pre-tax 401k, you need to make a $231,000 gross withdrawal because every dollar is taxed as ordinary income. And a big portion of that falls into the 24% bracket or higher. But strategically pull $110,000 from the 401k, $70,000 from a Roth tax-free, and $32,000 from a taxable brokerage account at those favorable long-term capital gains rates. You only need like $212,000 in gross withdrawals to net that same $180,000 need. That's $19,000 less withdrawn annually, and you're saving roughly 22 grand a year in taxes. Over a 20-year horizon, that's over $400,000 in tax savings just from smarter sequencing. Plus, you preserve significantly more of your 401k balance for strategic use later. And the difference is the intentional planning about which accounts you're harvesting from based on tax efficiency. Now, the second blind spot is Social Security timing coordination. If you retire at 62 but you delay Social Security until 70, you'll have 8 years of low income opportunity for strategic planning. But if you claim Social Security at 62 just because you felt like it, you've permanently reduced your benefit by about 30% compared to your full retirement age and roughly 75% compared to waiting till age 70. So, for someone with a full retirement age benefit of $3,000 per month, that's the difference between collecting $2,100 per month at 62 versus $3,720 per month at age 70. And over a 25-year retirement, that's about $485,000 in lost lifetime benefits. And that's one side of the table, but here's what most people miss is that when you pass away, your surviving spouse gets the higher of the two benefits. If you claimed early and reduced your benefit by 30%, your spouse is potentially now stuck with that reduced amount for the rest of their life, potentially decades of lower income when they need it most. Plus, claiming early adds $25,000 to $50,000 of annual taxable income immediately, shrinking your conversion window and potentially triggering taxation of your Social Security benefits themselves. The point here isn't that there is just one right age to claim. It's that most people make the decision in isolation without understanding how it integrates with their withdrawal strategy and survivor protection. The difference in lifetime wealth between strategic planning and just claiming whenever you feel like it can easily exceed $100,000 for couples with substantial assets. The third blind spot is Medicare premium surcharges. Your income from 2 years ago determines what your Medicare premiums will be in the current year. Without careful withdrawal structuring, you trigger IRMA, adding at $3,000 to $6,000 annually in healthcare costs as a couple. One poorly timed withdrawal can spike your income and you're paying elevated premiums 2 years later. Over 10 to 15 years, that's $30,000 to $90,000 in unnecessary costs. And the fourth blind spot is the RMD tax time bomb. Let me give you a real example from an unmarried client who just started her required minimum distributions. Before RMDs, she had a pension at $48,000, Social Security at $52,000, making withdrawals from her 401k at $75,000. Her total income was $175,000, being in the 24% bracket, paying around $30,000 in taxes. And after required minimum distribution started, she had the same pension and Social Security, but was forced to withdraw $145,000 from her $3.8 million 401k. And her new income was pushed up to $245,000 into the 32% tax bracket, paying $58,000 in taxes plus an additional $3,600 in Medicare surcharges. Her tax bill nearly doubled, and she doesn't even need that $145K. I asked if there were any charities she wanted to support so we could at least do some qualified charitable distributions tax-free, but she didn't have any goals as such. So now we just pay $58,000 in taxes each year just to move money from her 401k into her brokerage account. And this is the RMD tax time bomb. This forced income you don't need, causing dramatically higher taxes, Medicare surcharges, and increased Social Security taxation. Over 15 to 20 years, this costs potentially well over $500,000 in unnecessary taxes. But why does this happen? Because again, we're taught to accumulate for 30 years, then handed millions and expected to figure out tax optimized withdrawals ourselves. These four blind spots can each cost six figures, and combined, we're potentially talking seven-figure mistakes, resulting in unnecessary costs for retirees with $3 to $6 million in investments. And now that you understand this distribution transformation, if you're wondering how to implement this 401k shift for maximum early retirement success, click the link in the description to book a call, and I'll show you exactly how to execute this strategy for your specific situation and plan and your dream retirement. Now, there's a specific window where all four problems can be prevented, and most people overlook it entirely. Because between when you retire and when Social Security and RMDs kick in, you have complete control over your taxable income. And this is often the only period in your adult life where this can be true. Because during your career, income was fixed by salary, and at RMDs, income is partially forced. But in this window, you decide exactly how much taxable income to recognize. And this creates the government's discount window on taxes. For example, you can do Roth conversions at 22%, maybe 24%, or if your income goal is $130,000 or lower per year, there's a strong chance you can convert at just 12% with proper structuring. Compare that to at 32% or higher rates when RMDs force you into higher brackets. If taxes were on sale, paying 22% now instead of 32% later on the exact same money, but only during one decade of your life, why wouldn't you factor that window into your retirement plan? Because that's exactly what it is. The savings compound because they get converted money growing tax free forever. Let me show you what this looks like comparing two client scenarios. We'll start with Sarah, who retired at 62 with 3.2 million in her 401k. She converted $180,000 after 4 years at 22 to 24% tax rates, paying around 42 grand in taxes. At 75, her remaining $2.3 million means RMDs are around $95,000 annually, keeping her in that 24% tax bracket. Now, Tom worked until 68 with $3.8 million, 600 grand more than Sarah. But his pension kicked in, bumping him into higher tax brackets, and he really didn't convert anything into Roth. At 75, his RMD is at $148,000. Combined with a pension and Social Security, his total income is 210 grand, pushing him into 32% tax bracket, triggering Medicare surcharges and causing his Social Security to be fully taxed. And the result is, despite having 600 grand more, Tom will pay approximately $380,000 more in lifetime taxes than Sarah, despite her retiring 6 years earlier and keeping significantly more of her wealth. Now, why do people miss this? Again, they're in the accumulation mode thinking if I just work 3 more years, I'll have 400K more, without accounting for what happens to forced withdrawals when they're hit at the worst tax rates. And understanding this optimal tax window is the difference between six-figure savings and potential six-figure disasters. But this window isn't enough. You need the right storage system. Think about retirement income like your harvest storage. You need different silos for different purposes. Smart farmers don't keep their entire harvest in one silo because if it has a problem, that whole crop is at risk. Multiple storage options protect your harvest and provide flexibility. And same with your retirement accounts. A pre-tax 401k would be your main storage. Roth accounts are your tax-free storage. And taxable brokerage is your accessible storage. So for example, if you have a low expense year needing 140K, pull 80K from the 401k, 10,000 from the Roth, and $50,000 from your taxable account, all staying within the 12% marginal income tax bracket. If you have a big tax year, if you have a big expense year needing say 220K, you pull 95K from the 401k, 50 grand from the Roth, and 75,000 from the taxable account, you're now in just the 22% income tax bracket. But without these multiple buckets, you're stuck at pulling everything from one source at whatever tax rate that forces you into, with zero flexibility. And this impact is significant. I've seen clients with $3.2 million distributed across 3 different account types have 15 to 20% more after tax over retirement accounts with $4.5 million in all pre-tax accounts. Now, why does this happen? Because strategic blending from multiple buckets allows us to minimize taxes, control our Medicare premiums, and optimize Social Security taxation. One account type means every withdrawal is fully taxable with no flexibility. Now, I must say, I'm not saying stop 401k contributions entirely, especially with free employer matching contributions. But keep in mind, maxing out your 401k while building zero taxable brokerage flexibility creates a real problem. This multiple storage system protects your harvests and provides you options. Now that you understand the accumulation problem, the distribution blind spots, the conversion window, and the tax bucket strategy, let me show you how to turn all of this into a plan for you. Moving from accumulation to strategic distribution requires analyzing your specific situation, not just general rules. And I boil it down to 3 key questions. First, what do you need annually? Most of my clients with 2 to 5 million in their investments find their true all-in annual needs fall between $150,000 and $250,000 after taxes. This is specific to your housing, healthcare, travel, and activities that matter. Second question is, what can your portfolio sustainably provide? This requires actual analysis of your holdings, your tax situation, timeline, and flexibility, not just a 4% withdrawal rate. And the third question is, what will Social Security and pensions add? If these sources can cover part of the gap between your need and what your portfolio can provide, you're likely working longer than necessary. And here's what surprises people. When I run these personalized projections for clients who are convinced they need to work until 67 or 70, around 60% of them discover they could retire 2 to 4 years earlier with strategic distribution planning. Why? Because they plan based on generic or arbitrary targets instead of their actual needs, specific tax situation, and this optimization window. And the beauty of this is that they're unlocking 3 to 5 extra years of freedom during their healthiest retirement years. This prevents critical mistakes such as the one more year syndrome, six-figure tax errors, or working through your 60s for minimal benefit and the regret of realizing too late you worked longer than necessary. Every successful farmer measures twice and cuts once. They calculate harvest needs, plan for optimal timing, and prepare proper storage. And your retirement deserves that same intentional planning, not just endless accumulation, not generic rules. Now that you understand the 401k change that transforms early retirement, if you want this implemented in your situation, click the link in the description to book a call, and I'll show you exactly how to execute the strategy for your specific situation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.